Civic Events Advisory Board. We'll call this meeting to order. First off will be public comment. The board takes public comment on all items in the regular agenda. Public input on a regular agenda item will be taken at its appropriate discussion. Public input on an item on the agenda or consent agenda may be identified and requested for consideration by the board at this time. The board may request an item to be placed on a future agenda or for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for public comment. So at this time, do we have any public comment? And if we don't, we'll go ahead and move forward to the consent agenda, consideration of approving the October 26, 2017 meeting minutes. Has everybody had ample time to review those minutes?
I have a question on the minutes. I think it's a little too generalized for the way the meeting was last time. I don't think there's enough detail compared to how the meeting, as much as we had at the meeting, I don't think there's as much detail. And then also on F, where it says will be added to the fiscal year 18 facility improvement projects. I don't remember us actually doing that in the meeting.
I don't remember that either. Does anybody else on the board remember us postponing it? Or I just remember us postponing it, dropping it right then, tabling it. I don't remember anyone telling us it was going to be, the chiller was going to be put on the facility improvements.
You all can review the meeting minutes online. It was said, it was spoken.
What's different? The meeting minutes online and the minutes that we're approving right now.
Nothing. It's the same thing that was put on the meeting minutes. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Oh, you're talking the recording.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just don't remember that part.
You all were given emails to have a discussion about the chiller too as well. But we didn't get any response from you all too as well.
That's correct. And I think, Mikhail, I think what you're saying here is, for example, we've got our city attorney here to discuss an agenda item on the role of Civic Events Advisory Board. And I think it's not in the minutes, although we did talk about it in the minutes, what was our role. And I see that we're addressing it, but I just don't see it. Is it in there?
Yeah, enough. That I asked to table it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Table it until we had further explanation.
All right, good. Okay. So everybody clear? Any other questions on the minutes?
I do. I just don't think there's enough detail in there, but that's my opinion.
Okay, so you just want, so if we could, let's review the tapes, and if there's anything else that we need to add on. But at this time, we'll call a vote to approve the minutes. Anybody make a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I'm going to wait until I review. I just want to make sure that part is right.
So no motion to approve the minutes as written? Okay, then we'll just go ahead and move on then. All right, regular agenda. Presentation of monthly financial report and event calendar.
Good morning, Board. How are y'all?
Good.
I think you've got a copy of the fund balance report in front of you. And if you'll notice, fund balance for civic events is at a little over $709,000. That is down a little bit from what we ended the year with for fiscal year 17. But don't be too concerned about that, because in the month of October, we always encumber funds for the whole year for certain vendors. And when that money is encumbered, that means that that money cannot be used for anything else other than that particular purchase order, unless I cancel it. So it's always, October is always going to show a little bit of a exceeding the expense budget. Also, there is the catastrophic insurance is usually taken out in its entirety in that first month for the year. So other than that, everything looks fairly good. So you have any questions?
Don, one of the things that I was hoping to see, and I don't know if maybe you can get it by the next minute, and that was where we had requested this, basically this report that we had for over the, it's in there? Okay. Okay, Mr. Walker just said it was in there. Okay, so okay. I just hadn't seen it yet. All right.
I have a couple of questions, Don. before you sneak off. Maybe that's what you were alluding to, but under non-departmental, you got capital and maintenance. We had a budget of 8,300, and we've already exceeded that.
Yes, that
Well, that was-
$8,333 was an amount that I had originally budgeted for fiscal year 18 for the month of October as part of the fund balance or the Fund 605 that was created. So what they did, the budget department moved that money back into our capital funds so that we could use it because we'd already had the money budgeted and it had already been approved. But since they decided to create a new fund for hotel occupancy tax, that money was available. So I asked them if they would put that money into our non-building capital improvements so that we can use that money, and we've already used that money. Now, that's in addition to what will be allowed to carry over from 17, what I have requested. And to my knowledge, all the money for building, non-improvement building capital has been approved.
I also had two other questions. Sorry to hoard the mic, guys, but another question that I had was, and you may not have this off the top of your head, but can you tell me what our expense is associated with indirect cost? Can you tell me what that number is that's budgeted this year?
Budgeted for this year? I'd have to look that up, Stephen.
And that's fine. I was just curious what that number was.
Okay. You're just talking about the indirect cost,
Right.
and you want a detail of the amount we budgeted this year?
Just what that number is that goes back to the
Okay.
general fund for indirect costs. And the last thing I wanted to make note of is if you guys go on that second page, on that back side, you look at that fund balance, and this is why it's good that we split these two funds out. You'll look that basically they over budgeted $150,000 to decrease the fund balance. And that was always a concern that I had. You know, you've got 47% going to roughly 47% going to CVB, 48 going to us, 5 going to SACAC. And then there's the other numbers that, you know, the Fort Concho, the Texas Bank, SAPAC. Those numbers were, I guess, agreed upon and put into the budget without our knowledge necessarily. But I want, you know, those are flat fees that don't fluctuate with the percentages of, you know, obviously we know that the hot dollars are down. And so our budget decreases based on less hot dollars coming in, but yet those flat fees that were agreed upon don't move. And so here we are taking a hit in our fund balance for those flat fees that aren't being adjusted at all. We're taking a hit. It's almost like we're being penalized in our fund balance that we could utilize for our facilities because those flat fees aren't being adjusted. And I know this was a conversation when those flat fees were implemented, that at the time it was a benefit, but now it's not because hot dollars have come down. So I think that needs to be a bigger discussion, possibly with city staff, to discuss, you know, when we decrease our budget based on hot dollars, why is nobody else taking that same hit? So again, just a comment, probably a bigger discussion maybe for another future agenda item.
That's a really good point, because, you know, their expense, or their item is basically fixed. Ours is gonna be variable, so we're gonna take the bigger brunt if revenue goes down.
I think we need to give the finance department an opportunity to explain why that happened. And it may be something that's gonna be corrected in this year too. Okay? Since they are the ones that actually move that money each month.
Right, but if we do start seeing a decrease and they're staying constant, we're the ones, like Steve said, we're the one taking a hit.
I can
And maybe
understand
they
that,
should be
yeah.
changed to a percentage basis just
Right.
as well. Okay.
Should hot dollars go up, how that will be handled.
Would you like for me to ask them to have Jaime or someone come and address that issue next time?
I think it'd be a good idea.
Okay.
Anything else for Mr. Maynard? All right, let's move to the event calendar. Good point.
Good morning. The The event calendar that you see has changed a little bit. We're up to 56 events. Until yesterday, I added 2 more. So we have 58 for December. The end of the month is pretty light due to the holidays. Out of that 56, 15 of them were city bookings.
I guess this kind of goes to my point of the indirect cost. We're paying indirect costs, but then on the flip side, we're offering free bookings. Again, I think this is why we need to look at our indirect cost payment that subsidizes the general fund, but yet they're getting services for free, and we're not getting services for free. Legal fees, no offense, Teresa, but legal fees, city manager's fees, those types of fees that we are paying for to receive those services, but it's not being reciprocated on the other end, and we're paying for that. So, again, this just, I think, brings light to my point.
Even on those indirect costs, I don't have a breakdown of the individual, but you're talking about that 99,000.
I just didn't see that 99,000 in our financials unless I overlooked it. I was just looking at a total number of the indirect costs that's being transferred back to the general fund.
Now, we do pay the general fund just a little bit less than $100,000 based on a study that was done several years ago.
Right.
And it's reviewed, I believe, every 3 years.
Right.
And the indirect costs are charged against the enterprise funds, which Civic Events is an enterprise fund. And the reason for that is it is the assistance that the finance department, which includes budget and accounting, and also human resources is part of that we help fund those because they help us just on an everyday basis. So that's part of it. And purchasing, of course, is part of finance too. So that is part of it, but I don't know how much goes to each one yet, which I can find out.
No, and basically what I was saying was we pay that $99,000 to the general fund for their services, which makes sense. But on the flip side, Civic Events is offering services for free. So there's not, it's not being
understand what you're saying.
reciprocated. To me, it's not a fair trade, but where we appreciate the services that we do receive, and it's well worth it, but we feel as if we're utilizing staff time and resources of our own, and it's coming to an expense to us.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any more questions on the calendar? All right. Let me go ahead and take a vote on the financials. I apologize, I skipped that. Do I hear a motion to approve the financials as presented? Okay, and that's what I was thinking. Yeah, okay. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. Discussion of Civic Events Advisory Board's role of civic events.
Everybody can see and hear me. So I got invited here to talk about the Civic Events Advisory Board and what your role is. This is not something that's unique to this board. This is something that me and my staff is going around to all of the boards to do. When I got here about 2 years ago, I realized that the boards, as we were looking through the bylaws and the statutory authorities and the ordinance authorities, that a lot of the boards were not real clear on what their role was. And so we're clarifying that, as well as providing some information about open meetings, because pretty much all of our boards are required to abide by those. And there's criminal penalties that are attached, so we want you to be well informed on what your responsibilities are. So the topics I want to go through, and I'll do this pretty quickly today, because you're not one of those boards where there's like tons of citizens who come. We can go through some of the open meeting stuff a lot more quickly. I want to concentrate more on what your authority is. But we'll talk about any statutory authority, how the Code of Ordinances regulates you, what your bylaws say, and then a little bit of a discussion on hotel occupancy tax, because I understand that the last meeting, hot tax was a hot topic. And so we really want you to understand where that is and what the responsibilities are. So here, when I look at the boards, and when we in the legal department look at boards, we look at these 3 different levels, basically, of authority. There's statutory requirements, whether on state or federal level, the city ordinances, and then the board's bylaws. Now, we have a lot of boards at the city that are statutorily required. The city council, for instance, the planning commission, board of adjustment, the animal services advisory board, the airport board, the parks board, all are statutorily required boards. This board is not statutorily required. This board is created by and serves at the pleasure of city council only, not of the Texas legislature. So that does affect in some ways what you can and can't do and how you interact with the city. So since we don't have any statutory authority to discuss, we're going to talk with the city ordinance. This board was created in Article 2.07, Division 14 of the City of Angelo Code of Ordinances. And it was actually created in a prior version of the code, and then we recodified and you became Article 2.07. So if you have some old documentation that has a different article than that, that's probably accurate at that time, but it's no longer the accurate citation. So in the Code of Ordinances, it not only creates the board, but it also spells out the duties of the board. And the duties, there's 3 of them, or actually really 2, and that's to advise the council on matters of policy, and to advise the city manager or representatives, which would be primarily Sydney, on administrative matters in regards to the operations of venues. So this is a policy-making board and an operations board. It doesn't delegate, however, any of these matters from city council. So there's no final authority, is how we say it in the legal world of this board. Everything you do is advisory to city council. That also means that city council can take action outside of your knowledge that's perfectly legitimate, and there's no requirement or even my recommendation to come to this board to do those things. It also says that members are appointed by the city council for a 3-year term, and as you may or may not know, we recently updated this to make sure it coincided with some changes you wanted in the bylaws. It does also say you must have monthly public meetings that conform to law, which means the Open Meetings Act, which is why we're going to discuss that a little bit. Your quorum is 4 members, and it specifically states that absences from 3 meetings in a calendar year is deemed to be a resignation. This is the harshest of all of these kind of provisions in any of our boards that I've seen, that you're gone 3 times, they deemed you to have resigned, and that we need to notify council there's a resignation on the board. So it looks like this is a full board. I've never heard this board is one with attendance issues, but you should all be aware of that provision. This has shall language throughout it. That doesn't mean it's optional. It means we have to abide by it. So once we get past the ordinance, we look at the bylaws. Now what the bylaws for a board are is your operating rules. So any authority that council leaves you outside of what they've told you you have to do, you're able to adjust through the bylaws. Your bylaws are approved by this board as well as city council, so there's a little bit of inherent approval, which is going to come in a minute when we talk about one of these issues. But whatever you guys decide cannot conflict with what the Code of Ordinances says. That is the governing document. Your operating rules do provide that notice is required if you are absent. So not only is it 3 absences is deemed a resignation, but if you're going to be absent, you need to tell somebody. And I don't know if that's our staff or that's the chair, but somebody needs to be told, and if that hasn't been worked out, it should be worked out. It does allow the chairman to call special and emergency meetings outside that 1 scheduled meeting a month. Now, I will say this about emergency meetings. Case law and state statute defines under the Open Meetings Act what constitutes an emergency. So, oops, we forgot to talk about this last time, isn't an emergency. You can't call an emergency meeting for that. You can call a special meeting, and the difference between the 2 is the notice required. Special meetings require 72 hours advance notice. Emergency meetings for a true emergency, which is basically health, safety, welfare, disaster kind of things, can be held without that 72 hours notice. I can't imagine a situation under which an emergency meeting will be necessary for this board, but I'm not going to say, because, lawyers are naturally just worst case scenario people, that it wouldn't happen, but I think it's very unlikely. The bylaws also define the duties, election, in terms of your officers, so how they serve, who they serve, what they're called. And then it defines your purpose. Now, if you look at the purpose in your bylaws, it's very similar to the purpose that was listed in the Code of Ordinances. Again, it says to advise council on policy and advise the city manager on administrative matters. But then there's this additional 2 things. Approve and recommend civic events budget for inclusion in the city's annual budget proposal. So should you be talking about the budget here? Yes, your bylaws say that you can. Council has approved those bylaws, so they've said we're okay with you discussing the budget. It also allows you to formulate and enact rules and policies related to operations of the facilities, but all of those before they go into effect require council approval. So again, there's no final authority either in this ordinance that created you or in your own bylaws regarding any of these matters. clarify further that not only is it one meeting a month, but they're at noon on the last Thursday at McNeese Convention Center, and that the chair can appoint subcommittees. So is there any question about any of that? I went through that pretty quickly. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm sure some of that's surprising to you based on conversations I've had about what this board is used for and what they believe their purpose was. And I think it's more limited than what some of the discussions I've heard. And I want to say this to that point, that just because there's not a purpose stated in the Code of Ordinances doesn't mean that staff can't still bring you issues for discussion. So, and this city is very good about seeking as much as they can the advice and the recommendations from the boards and committees we have, and that's a very good practice. What I don't want anybody to leave this room thinking is that that's a requirement. I mean, Carl especially takes things to boards. I'm like, why are we taking that to the board? He's like, well, I want to hear what they have to say, and that's a very good practice for him to have, but it's not a requirement. So let's talk about hot taxes. Yes, ma'am.
On the monthly meetings, so when we skip a meeting, how does that legally?
You're supposed to have a meeting every month per the Code of Ordinances. So if you're skipping a monthly meeting, then you're technically in violation of the code. Then the next question is, what's the penalty? Well, we're probably not going to penalize you for that if there was a legitimate reason. You know, if you skip a meeting because there's no quorum, or you skip a meeting because there's nothing to be discussed, we don't want to waste citizens' time by coming up here and sitting at a meeting where we're not going to tell you or have you give us any advice on anything. So yes, it's a violation. It's very tiny. We're not going to be really concerned about it unless it happens a lot. Any other questions? All right, let's talk about hotel occupancy tax. Now, I'll tell you, when I first came into the office, we started looking at these due balances from some of the people that we collect hotel occupancy tax from, and they were owing the city $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. My office has been much more aggressive about pursuing hotel occupancy tax delinquencies a lot sooner. We got council authorization to do that, and so when somebody starts falling behind, they first get contacted nicely by finance, and then not so nicely, you know, professionally, by one of my attorneys, Brandon Dyson. He got handed a check for $15,000, I think, last Friday, for a hotel tax collection that was in delinquency. So the funds are down, but we also are pursuing those more aggressively, making sure people are staying current, not letting them get into arrears as much, and we're going to continue to do that. These funds are known as hot funds, as you all know, and they are considered in our world, in finance world, as designated funds. And what that means is it's not like general fund money where we can just do what we want. Generally, under the statute, these are statutory regulated, they must be used to promote tourism within the city, and they have to fall into one of 9 categories. Now, I didn't want to bore you with all the legal language about what those 9 categories are, but occasionally I will get a question from one of you guys or from Carl or from Sid saying, do you think this fits a category? And we'll do some legal research. But basically, it's the construction or maintenance of facilities, registration costs for out-of-town events, promotional materials for civic events, some activities related to the promotion of the arts, historic restoration and historical event, and some sporting events and facilities. None of that, is any of that surprising to any of you guys? So here's the thing, even though you have, let me finish this first. So there's no authority delegated to any board, except for city council, regarding the use or recommendation of hot funds. Do we ask you about that? Yes, we do. But it's not because it's statutory. My thing just went out. Oh, thank you, Brian. It's not because it's statutory, it's because we value your insight into those things. There's no statute that says any board. Like, you know, I think Costa DC was mentioned in here that there's a presumption this is like Costa DC. Costa DC is created by statute. It's a separate entity from the city. It's given designated funds as well that they have the ability to recommend to council. They make the recommendation to council, this is how we're going to spend them, and council just ratifies their decision. This board is not created that way. This is completely different. There's no board like that that deals with hot funds. It is left entirely to council discretion. So earlier when you were talking about, I think, those static payments that are occurring, I know a couple of those that you mentioned were decisions by council to make those through agreements with some of those organizations. That was their discretion, and so you are kind of left to look at facilities, what the remainder is. Now, even though there's no statutory or code of ordinance requirement that we have to bring you hot fund questions, because you do make recommendations on policy about facilities and the operation of facilities, the two are naturally married. that there's going to be a discussion about hot money when we're talking about facilities. So I don't want anybody also to think that I'm saying that it's inappropriate for you to talk about hot funds in terms of civic events, because that's a very appropriate conversation to have. So are there any questions about that?
I guess just clarification for the most part. You know, before these funds were separated, there was revenue being generated by civic events that also fell down into the fund balance with hot dollars. So there's always the assumption that this board had some say, or at least receive a courtesy of how the fund balance was being used, because civic events was generating money that fell into the fund balance.
I think you are given the courtesy to determine how some of those funds are used, outside of what council says we're just using them for. So if they're going to say, SAPAC, we're going to give you this much of the hot funds for this project, then that's no longer anything we're going to give you the courtesy to look at. But I do think that there's a lot of value placed on this board, both by our city staff as well as by city council, to get your recommendation on where the rest of that money should be spent. So you're right, there is a courtesy there, and I think that there's every intention on keeping your opinions very relevant in those discussions. So any other questions on that? All right, so let's talk about Texas Open Meetings Act. Has everybody on the board taken the Texas Open Meetings Act training that's on the AG's website? Okay. Whenever you're reappointed to the board, you need to retake that training, because the language of the statute says every time you're appointed, you have to take it. So I know some of you guys are rolling off in 2018. If you're reappointed, you need to take that training again and give that certificate to the city clerk. But basically, the general rule of the Texas Open Meeting Act is that every regular, special, or called meeting must be open to the public and comply with the requirements, and that you cannot convene a meeting without quorum. So the question's always asked to me, well, we're not going to take any action. Is it okay just to discuss these items? And the answer is pretty clear in the Open Meetings Act, no. You cannot discuss business that you're going to take action on at some point or that comes before you if there's not quorum. Because you're an advisory board, the Act and the AG and the Texas statutes or the case law is pretty specifically stated there's no right for you to go into executive session. And the reason for that is that executive session is used essentially as a negotiation tool. Like when I'm talking in executive session with my counsel, it's almost always about real estate transactions where if we talked about it in public, it would impair our interest in our ability to negotiate. It's about litigation where there's a clear reason why we don't want to talk legal strategy, or do we want to sue this person, or do we want to take this action legally? So it's to protect the confidentiality that needs to be held between the attorney and their client. It's not, and this, I wish it were, because it would make life easier for all of us, it's not because it's an uncomfortable topic to discuss in public, or it looks like sausage making right now, we're not clear what we're going to say, and we don't want to look that disorganized. There really are very narrow exceptions to not having public meetings when you're a public entity, and advisory boards don't fit into any of them because they're not final decision makers. I noticed when I came here first that your bylaws did allow you to go in executive session, and that's one of the things when we modified them that I deleted and had that conversation with Carl and Sid. But it's very clear in the law that that's not allowed. All your meetings do require posting 72 hours before the meeting. Again, there's that emergency exception. If you meet it, we'll be happy to lower that, but general rule should be that 72 hours is the minimum. Now, the violations of the act can result in fines and/or incarceration. It was, when I first started as a city attorney, the AG's office was kind of like, ho-hum about the whole Open Meetings Act violations, but when Abbott became the AG, he was very serious about transparency in government. If you have ever heard him speak about anything, you know that is a keystone to that man's way of thinking about government, is everything needs to be transparent. And so when he became the Attorney General, he actually hired attorneys who their role is to prosecute open meetings violations when district attorneys won't. Because otherwise, we go down to the district attorney's office and it's like, do you want to prosecute the mayor for an open meetings violation? I mean, it's pretty clear what the answer to that's going to be. So to take some of the political out of it, he has, a band of attorneys who they will take those cases. So that thinking that used to be, well, that wouldn't happen here, I don't want anybody to rest easy on that. I want you to know what the rules are. Basically, there's 4 ways to violate the act. Because 3 and 4 deal with executive session, we don't have to worry about those. But 1, it's knowingly conspiring to violate the act by meeting in numbers less than quorum. So that's if you 3 meet, and then you 3 meet, and then you 3 meet, and then you 3 meet, and all discuss the same thing, that's a violation of the act. It's called a daisy chain meeting, And it's been litigated, there's been multiple councils who've been sued and they're fighting it. And until there's really clear authority from some judge that says, no, that's not a violation, attorneys are still advising that is a violation. Also, calling or participating in a closed meeting. So I don't come, and one of my attorneys doesn't come to this meeting because you're not a statutorily required meeting. And there's no final action you take. So if you ever are here and there's not a lawyer in the room, it's like, oh, the lawyer's not here, so let's go into closed session. That would be a violation of the act. And then again, 3 and 4 deal with executive session. So are there any questions about any of that?
I do have a question. I don't know that it pertains exactly to that, but you were talking about there's 72 hours required to call a meeting. Then does that also work in reverse? Is there 72 hours required to cancel a meeting?
No, ma'am. We can cancel a meeting just minutes before the meeting occurs.
Okay.
We just have to post the cancellation.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And that's a posting requirement, so we must post the meeting more than 72 hours. So give us 72 hours and 5 minutes is what we need so we can get the posting up.
Can you define the word post?
Yeah, we have to post it like physically at City Hall and put it on our internet website. So there has to be a meeting agenda. And for emergency meetings, we already have an agenda. We just plop the topic in there and the dates and the time. So we can do it pretty quickly on an emergency basis, but it has to be an agenda's posted.
Who has the authority to cancel a meeting?
Well, it's not clearly spelled out really who has the authority to cancel a meeting. Typically, it's city staff. Occasionally, council members were asked that something be removed from an agenda, leaving nothing else to discuss, and then we're canceling the meeting. But most frequently, it's based on quorum. You don't have quorum, and we cancel it at the meeting time itself. I don't know if I've been here, and there's been a couple of meetings where they missed the posting deadline, and so we had to cancel them based on legal reasons. But canceling meetings here is not a big deal. I've not run into that there's a lot of that happening unnecessarily.
Just a question, as far as, so you have to have it 72 hours in advance, how much backup? Is it just the agenda that has to be posted 72 hours, or?
Yeah, it's the agenda. I mean, really, it depends on Brian Kendrick, the city clerk, and how quickly he can get it done. So if it's like literally 72 hours and 5 minutes and Brian's not available, you're probably going to have to push the meeting a little bit. That is the only provision. And again, we have templates for agendas, so we can get them out pretty quickly if we know what they are and you know what you want to talk about, but sometimes locating one of us is the problem.
So as far as the backup paperwork that goes with the agenda, does that have to be out a certain time, or?
It does not, no. That's a courtesy. You need to speak into your mic a little more clearly. That's okay. We don't have to provide any of that. We could provide it just to you today, like I think you were handed the presentation today. It becomes part of the record when we hand it to you in a meeting, but we want you to have as much information as possible before a meeting, so we get it out as quickly as possible. Any other questions? So the other provision, this is a scary one to me, is you can be convicted of a violation of the Open Meetings Act even if you were unaware the meeting's illegal. So even if you were unaware that you were participating in a daisy chain meeting, you could still be convicted under the Open Meetings Act. Has that ever happened? I've never seen anybody convicted where they truly didn't know, but just be aware that's out there. So if you ever have a question on, should I be participating in this meeting, or this guy called me, should I talk to him? If you call my office, I'm always going to give you a legal opinion in writing on that, and that's because the statute specifically says it's a defense to prosecution if you have a legal opinion saying you participate in the meeting. If you talk to one of my other lawyers and they're not giving you, or they haven't mentioned they're going to email that to you, or they'll email you an opinion, then ask for something in writing so that you're protected. All right, some issues that come up are subcommittees. I don't know how many subcommittees you guys have, but if there's a quorum present, it's a regular meeting. It's not a subcommittee meeting, so be careful on your quorum. Location, you always meet here, so this isn't a problem. You can't go into some tiny closet somewhere and not have space for the public. It has to be large enough to accommodate the public. Social media is like a hotbed right now in open meetings. If you all comment on something that's before you on this board on social media, that constitutes a meeting under the Act. And again, until a judge tells us different, that's the only advice we can give you. So be very careful on posting on social media. And it just, it inflames situations. You guys have an opportunity here to talk, and this is where you should use that opportunity as much as possible. And then public comment, I asked if there's a lot of public that comes here, and there's not, but if you ever do have public comment, there's nothing in the act that entitles anybody in the public to speak at any of these meetings. So if the chair chooses not to have a public comment period, then you don't have to have a public comment period, and there's no legal violation there. I will tell you that in San Angelo, it is a historical practice that we let the public speak. So even though there's no legal violation, I think it will cause a concern. And if public comment is allowed, then reasonable rules are appropriate. That includes limiting the number of speakers, the amount of time for public comment, whether or not they are allowed to give presentations. If you do get questions, and this is, the public likes to use it as an opportunity to ask a question that they've had on their mind, it's really supposed to be them telling you their opinion. You shouldn't be answering questions. So if you're asked a question, your only responses can be a statement of fact on whatever they're asking about, a statement of policy, or a proposal to put it on a future agenda to discuss. Any questions should be directed to you and not to staff. There's some boards where, the public likes to use it as an opportunity to throw barbs at staff. That's not the point. It's to give you information to make decisions. So chair's responsibility is to direct questions to the chair. But if a question that they're asking, you're also wondering, it's completely appropriate for a board member to ask a staff a question during a meeting. And then conflicts of interest. I don't know if there's any conflicts in this. I mean, I can anticipate there might be some just based on the nature of the board and meeting you all. But it's your decision really whether to decide whether or not you have a conflict of interest. And that's because you're the one who understands what your financial responsibilities, obligations, and revenues, where they come from. I can help you work through some of that. If you have a question, you should avoid any discussions or voting on any issues where there's going to be a financial outcome that's going to benefit either you or a member of your family, is the general rule. And what financial benefit is, we can talk about. And you'll see, if you come to council meetings, you'll see city council members occasionally pull me in the back. That's almost always what we're talking about. Do you think this is a conflict? And we'll talk through it. And my advice is going to be very conservative, that if you think you have a conflict, then why don't you just sit this one out? Because if you think there's a conflict, there's going to be an appearance of a conflict, and it could cause a problem. They don't exclude you from participating on the board, just from participating in that particular issue. So I went through that really quickly. I do appreciate the time to come and go through that with you guys. Do you have any questions today? And if not, feel free. I mean, you're all welcome to call me or email me at my office, and if I'm there, I'll answer my phone.
Okay, I was holding my questions to the end, just
Okay.
kind of to formulate everything. I'm going back to the bylaws where it says purpose, advise council on policy. So when we advise council, are you meaning for us to get on the agenda and talk to them about policy? Like, for example, right now, we're currently going over all our policy review. Should a board member be present to go over that, or is it Mr.
No.
Walker's responsibility to go over that?
That's staff's responsibility to present that. We're gathering the information from you and taking it to staff. Now, I know some board members, the chair will come to meetings where those things are being discussed in case there's a question, but it's not something that's required.
Okay. And then, I mean, I've been on this board 3 years, advise city manager and representatives on administrative matters related to venues. Once again, so is that something that we just schedule with the city manager if we have any kind of questions on those sorts of things?
No, well, I mean, if you have questions, staff is your liaison to the whole city, so you should be talking to Sydney or to Carl over there about those things. And if you want something on the agenda, this is where you discuss it. So that's what that means, that this board together needs to be advising them. So if there's an issue of administration related to a venue that you want to discuss, you need to have them put it on an agenda so you can discuss it. That also allows us to have a better discussion because we can research it and get you real information and not be relying on our memories or what we've heard or those sorts of things.
Okay, so we discussed something, we talked to Carl, we talked to Sid, and then they'll forward those concerns then?
Yeah.
Okay. The last thing, one of the things that really covers a lot of our year is facilities review. I didn't see anything addressed on this.
The what review?
Facilities reviews, that's where
Right.
we actually physically go out to the facilities, look at what kind of items are needing to be addressed, and then make recommendations through Sydney to take to council on
I
things
think-
that we like to get fixed.
Yeah, I think that would be incorporated in the administrative matters related to venues. Maintenance, I think, fits very clearly in there. It's administration, which means maintenance and upkeep and all of those sorts of things. So I think both the Vice Council on Policy as well as the administrative matters related to venues are broad enough that a lot of those things can fit in there. And again, the bylaws and the purposes stated both in the ordinance as well as in your bylaws, that does not limit what we can bring to you. So if there's something that they want you to factor in, or they want to have a discussion, or they want your input on, they can still bring those things to you too. It's just these are the only things we have to bring to you.
Okay, and I guess the last thing related on hot taxes, okay? And just in just talking with people, I don't know that, and I know you kind of skipped over it, there's a lot of people that don't understand the two-step process. The first one that you gotta clear, and then you've got the 9 items below that. And I think that's why this board, you know, we've educated ourselves on those rules, and I know that the city council has final say. There's no disagreement with that. But, of course, and I think that's why we think some of the things need to be washed through us before they go to council, so that because we understand those rules to see if they fit in there. And then that way, everything's not going straight to council and without some board review, not because, do you follow me?
No, I completely
When you said
understand.
something about it being married, that's exactly what I'm talking
Exactly,
about.
yes.
Because those things are being married, and so if these things are going to council and don't go through review of the board first, well, we do know some of those rules. And, you know, I know we don't have the last say on hot taxes, but in a way, I guess maybe over the years it's formulated that
Absolutely.
we kind of oversee hot tax, at least that the recommendations are going to council are meeting those requirements. And I think that's kind of where we're being, you know, I guess there's, I don't know, there's some vagueness, I guess, on some of those things. Because you can go by the law straightforward, you know, black or white, but I think it's that gray area that we get into on what we should be discussing, what we should be recommending, and what should pass through us. And I don't mind giving you a case in point. And that's something that when Rick Weiss called us to discuss an item over a chiller, okay? Because we'll end up spending hot taxes on this chiller, but the chiller also serves the rodeo board in their facility in the Spurs Arena. And we saw that it got placed on a placeholder in city council without ever coming to us. So we're thinking, should it come to us? Should it not come to us? Because it does hit those funds that, once again, somebody stand up.
I'll put you to sleep.
So we're wondering, I mean, and Rick Weiss, and I understand what he said. He goes, city council is basically the citizens oversight committee on how those hot funds, but at the same time, you know, what is our purpose? If there's no purpose, do we even need to be here? You know, should those things kind of be ran through us?
Right. You know, and I think the answer to that is that I know that council values your insight and your opinions on those things, but the reality is that sometimes things happen quickly. And usually things that happen quickly are HVAC systems. And if something doesn't get run through here, what I don't want to happen is I don't want there to be hard feelings about that, because really they don't have to come here at all. And, you know, and back to what you said about you guys being really in tune with the rules. I understand that you are, and I appreciate that about this board, but I don't know if it's a chicken or egg thing. I don't know if it's you're good with the rules and therefore they bring you questions about hot money, or if they bring you questions about hot money over time, you had to become good at the rules. So again, the focus of what I want you to leave here knowing is that the council and staff value your opinion on those issues. Finance values your opinion on those issues, but they don't have to bring those questions to you. I'm sure that I haven't heard anybody say that there is an intent to stop bringing those kind of questions here, or that they think that council shouldn't have the input of this board, but just that they don't have to. There's no string attached to that money that you guys hold.
And that concerns me a little bit. Once again, we did facility reviews. We're going through and saying, hey, these are the things that we need to do. We had a meeting with the fire marshal saying, basically what he told us is at this point, I mean, if he chose to, could shut us down at any point. We could have a big concert scheduled. So we're trying to get some things going that are going to do what? Cost money, okay? And all of a sudden, we're getting somebody else yanking money because they don't know the things that we're facing. And all of a sudden, they go straight to council, get some money allocated. Now we're draining the fund, and we've got to keep so much. Don, I think, told us we have to keep like, what, 500,000, Don? 90 days. And so we can, of course, we're not going to spend everything, but do you see the conflict there?
No, I do see the conflict, and I think staff does a good job of making sure that you guys stay on the front burner with council. I've seen Sid multiple times come up there and talk about the state of facilities and the money that's needed. It comes up during every budget process that we have. I know that you have input into the budget that is presented to council through our budget process, and so it's not that it's not being heard. And I don't know, I'm not familiar at all with the whole rodeo association, all that happened, but I know that as a general rule that your facilities and the different work you do on the facilities is incorporated into funding plans for the city. It's just that there's not a lot of money.
That is correct, and that's why the concern came, and all of a sudden, and we got protective. We got a little protective of the funds that were in there, because we know that the things that we're going to have to request to spend money on, and then somebody takes a big chunk, and I think that's where, I don't know if you're here because of that, but I think you said you were going to every board anyway, but
Yeah,
I think
it
that's
was
where
just a nice
some of the things that you're
coincidence.
hearing probably came from those types of meetings,
Right. Yes. And I think that rather than thinking about it as they're using the money that you guys believed that you had authority over, rather not thinking about it that way, but thinking about the facilities that you guys have authority over are being harmed by removing money that you thought was going to go benefit those facilities. And so that's the conversation that needs to be had. Not that we have control over the hot money and it's our discussion and we want to make this decision, but rather we have these facilities and you've entrusted us with giving you information regarding these facilities. These are our needs. This is the money you give us, and we're concerned that you're removing that.
Right, because we go through a process where, like, maybe in April, we'll review the facilities and then discuss the things that are important and prioritize.
Right.
And it takes us 4, 5, 6 months to finally get a plan together to take to council, where I see somebody else in a flash just go straight there. And yeah, did that rub us the wrong way? It did.
Yeah, I know. And I don't even know if it was in a flash. I've never seen anything happen
It
in a
wasn't
flash in the
flash,
city.
but it seemed a lot,
It was very fast
they
for
found a
citywide.
shortcut that we
Right,
didn't
okay.
see.
So are there any other questions? Again, I'm available to all you guys to answer questions, and I know some of you email me occasionally when you have a question, and that's perfectly appropriate. I will tell you, if you email me without Sid knowing about it, I will CC him and/or Carl on any response to you, just so they're aware the question's been asked. But otherwise, I'm getting the,
One last question, sorry, I know you need to get out of here, sorry. You're speaking specific to hot dollars that we do not have authority over, the total authority over. Now, is that to say the same for over-realized revenue? Because again, those are commingled funds, commingled dollars that are dropping down into the fund balance, and I think that's where we take some type of ownership over realized. Now, it's probably very seldom happens that we receive, but since Sid's been here, we've received over-realized revenue that's flowed down in the fund balance that gets commingled with hot dollars that then gets swept. And so that's the concern that, just the courtesy of letting us know kind of what's going on, so we can take that into account next time we're looking at our venues.
right. Yeah, you don't have any authority, none of us do, except for council over any of that funding. Again, you have the authority to recommend it for certain processes and things within your facilities.
Thank you, Teresa.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate you coming by. Not at all. All right, well, let's move forward. Discussion and consideration of civic events policies and recommending matters related thereto.
Go ahead and get started on our on the facility policies. Of course, we had been meeting. The committee has been meeting to discuss the review of these policies as well, and then they did send it to you all for review as well. I did not hear anything from anybody about any questions concerning what the policy stated, what was in there. That's the best time to at least get in touch with me by email, by phone. Everybody has my phone number. You have my email address. You have everything. It's best for us to be able to communicate with each other to be able to move forward. If we don't communicate outside of here, it's hard for me to answer your question whenever I stand up here. So I appreciate it when y'all could get in touch with me whenever we need.
Well, and I'll bring that to Teresa's. If we did where we were going to email certain policy people. All of a sudden, when that exact same thing, what you talked about is exactly what I thought about whenever he said that. Would we be in violation, Teresa?
That's what I think about too whenever somebody says that. As long as you're not replying all, if everybody's having an independent discussion with Sid, then that's fine. If you're replying all and everybody's hearing the same information and you're kind of discussing it through email, that's when it's a problem.
What I'm clearly talking about is discussing individually with you all. I reach out to each of you. I reach out to each of you about different items, and if I do not hear nothing back, coming up to the board and speaking about it without giving me the opportunity to be able to review it, it just doesn't look good for anybody. Not for who's asking the question, and not for me definitely having to answer it. I love to be able to come to you all with the answers already ready to go, not for a test. I'm not here for that.
Well, then I need clarification, because I did get your email, and I got Billy's email, go through the policies. If you have any questions, I was instructed to reply back to our chairman.
Which was fine, and then he would get back in touch with me, which is fine.
Okay, so that's why I did not respond to
well,
yours.
that's fine.
Okay.
Excuse
I'll
me?
just say, as a city attorney, if I could remove the reply all button from all boards and commissions emails, I would do that. So just beware of the reply all. Reply Sid.
I get your point, Sid, and as I've heard her, now I'm scared that, basically we were trying to expedite the policies thing, so I was tasked to email Karen, who would get some input, send it back to me, and then I would send it to Sid. From what I heard from you, that was almost a violation if we had gone through that. And that's why I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad everybody just kind of dropped the ball on that, because that kind of kept us out of jail.
I
Well, it was
kept it
just
right here. That's all
No,
right
it wouldn't
here.
have been
I
a
wrote it down.
violation, because you're just speaking clearly to one person. She said if it was a group of us speaking,
I think we were trying to be very careful not to have.
not to
I understand,
do that.
but now that we've had clarification on the rules, you can ask her. I know, I heard her and I understood her. It would have been a violation.
It didn't reply all to you all.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. It wasn't a reply to all. I situated that. Thank you. All you got to do is just call me and give me a call, and I can answer the question.
Yeah, but I understand.
What we're trying to avoid is this
Is this right here?
sausage-making meeting where we sit here and just go over each policy word for word. We just can't do that.
And then me question about it.
No, that's the part. I understand it. I know where you're coming from.
So with the civic event facility policies, of course, there was, after talking with Mr. Carl White about different things, we decided that we were going to take out the vision and the mission statement and just be able to put in an actual purpose statement. The purpose statement, of course, nobody has been able to discuss that, so if we all would like to discuss that, we definitely can. But coming up with it, I put the purpose of this document is to provide procedures and guidelines to follow in the Civic Events Department. These procedures and guidelines should be viewed as directional, informative, and provide guidance for all involved with civic events unless specified policies are negated by existing ordinances. The development and the review of the Civic Events policy should originate with the Civic Events Department with recommendations from the Civic Events Advisory Board and approved by City Council.
Right. I don't think y'all had much time to see this. That part's fairly new. Right. And it's really just an opening statement saying, here are these policies, this is what they're for.
No, and I read it. I was good with that.
So if you have any comments on this one, please.
No, I was good. I did review it, and I didn't. I was only going to reply back on things that I had issues with.
So going to definitions, we did add in the definition of total gross, which is all earnings from all revenue sources from an event, for an event before deductions. So that definition was added to the rest of the definitions that we did have stated in the first meeting. If you go to a lot of the language that we also was clearing up was trying to delete and get rid of the terms deposit and security fee. And with taking those away, we were adding in required payment or see the fee schedule, because the prices could change, of course. Of course, we have a fee schedule, and that's what we would like our customers to look at whenever we do give them quotes on prices for anything. That's what we fall back on, is that fee schedule. So instead of saying, hey, it's in our policy, we need to just have them go ahead and look at that instead. So in different areas, instead of it saying, like I said, deposit or a security fee, it's going to say it's a required payment, or for somebody to look at the fee schedule for the adjusted amount. Booking schedule. I know last time we did meet, we had a discussion about adding in some information about the CVB. I did meet with Ms. Diane Bays about this, and we did come up with adding to the booking schedule, CVB is allowed to hold dates no more than 4 years in advance unless agreed upon with Civic Events Manager. If less than a year out, Civic Events shall inform CVB of pending convention dates to ensure that they are released in a timely manner for open public or private bookings. And then we also did the one we added under facility discounts. Under facility discounts, we did add in after the event, because there was a question about how will the rooms be tracked. So she decided that after the event, rooms will be tracked based on pickup reports returned to the CVB by the hoteliers.
Sid, can I go back
Yes.
to concessions?
Yes, sir.
And I'm not sure if this is a proper time to talk about this. You can tell me to stop. But under concessions, we have a contract with a concessionaire. Now, that's exclusive. Do they have the option to opt out of that, the vendor themselves?
All right. The question again.
Carlo have the opportunity to opt out of an event. Let's say he doesn't want to do the event. Can Carlo say?
I believe in the wording in his agreement is that if he has exclusive right, if we request that service, he's got to provide it.
The city requires that service?
Yes. If he has exclusive use for
To that
food and
facility.
alcohol at one of our venues, if we request that service, then he has to provide it.
What if an outside entity comes in to rent a facility and wants to have alcohol there? Is he required to provide that service?
I believe so.
Yes.
Coming back to the purpose of the Civic Events Board, if he chooses to opt out to provide that service to a certain entity, does he have to approach us? Can he approach council? Who makes that decision to let him opt out to provide to a certain entity?
We would have to modify his contract because it does require performance now, and so that would be a council that we would probably, I would think, bring that to you to see if we'd want to make that modification, get your opinion on it, and then take it to council for the actual contract amendment.
Thank you.
Before you move on,
Yes.
on the bookings, the items you discussed with Diane,
Yes.
was she in agreement with these as far as the CVB goes?
Yes, we met together on these issues. She's the one that we worked up the language together. Going on to novelties. In novelties, we just removed the flat fee structure that was placed on there and just went across where it has the 20%. That's the only thing that we actually removed from that, what we've been working off of, at least 20%. Under post-event breakdown, outside venues, I just added loaded just into the staff rate. I just don't think it said that. Where it says lessee will pay the hourly loaded staff rate. Should the breakdown require staff overtime, lessee will be charged the resulting overtime rate. So it was just adding in that one word.
Can you go back and just talk about novelties really quick? What is that?
Novelties is like whenever we do have a concert, somebody brings CDs, T-shirts,
Sell?
all those things, items to sell and stuff. So that's our merchandise.
You guys get 20% of that?
20%, yes, sir. 20% or most of the times we do let it run, or sometimes we do have a flat fee.
So like what
That will
about
work out.
trade shows and things of that nature?
It doesn't concern for trade shows or conventions or things like that as well. It doesn't. It's just for like concerts,
like
comedy
ladies'
shows.
night out, that type of thing? Where
Not for any type of event like that. So those are considered the trade shows. Also with the restrictions, we just took out no glass allowed on each one of those. I mean, it's already the ordinance, and just cleaning up the language from there. With stalls for the indoor arena, we did delete the amount of stalls available, just to take out any type of numbers out of there too as well. And then we did delete the ticketing, counting, and ticketed events due to we do not actually sell the tickets anymore. Actually, today does make the day that we do not have a ticketing agreement at all. Well, it expires after today. So we did take out the ticket accounting and ticketed events, and we added in instead the ticket vendor guidelines. Now, the ticket vendor guidelines I did discuss this with Ms. Teresa James as well. And we have been working on this for a few months, just trying to put together some vendor guidelines for other ticket companies to be able to come in and be able to sell tickets for certain events. Many times promoters like to be able to choose who they will be selling their tickets through, whether the ticketing company helps them do marketing or it's just who they prefer that they like to work with. But in our case, we would like to be able to have some type of standards and guidelines that they would have to follow so we can make sure that we receive our revenue too as well for the facility whenever we do those cap fees or rental rates and stuff. So some of the guidelines that we did come up with would be, I'll just go through these. The provider shall not be a third-party ticket distributor or affiliate. 2, the provider shall staff events with a box office ticket seller the day of and during the event at no cost to the city. The provider shall be able to provide the ticket with all equipment needed for day of operations, including ticket scanners, etc., for all public events for which tickets are sold. The city will provide 1 staff person to take tickets at no charge. Provider shall bear all cost of any additional staff needed to take tickets on the day of the event. Any questions on those? Anybody? The provider shall be able to build the event with the promoter and city civic event staff based on the venue and design and print tickets. No tickets shall go on sale until the venue setup is approved in writing by the civic events manager. The provider shall be able to provide detailed reports with information on the amount of tickets sold, event revenue, and customer demographics to civic events at the conclusion of every event. The provider shall be able to provide a cash advance on the day of the event for promoters if requested. Cash advance must not surpass the amount that is owed to the city. The provider shall be able to settle with the city civic events department after the box office is closed or at a time agreed upon in writing with the civic events manager. The provider shall be able to settle with the city civic events department after the event, including facility fees, venue rental fees, and any other agreed fees. Settlement will be paid by company check by either the promoter or the ticketing company.
Let's step back on where you're running to get cash. What would be an example of why?
So let's take the monster truck show. Normally, he has to pay out his the truck drivers for that the day of. So for his event, he may come and say, "Hey, I need 10,000 cash advance to be able to take care of the needs for that day, including security."
That's really what my question was going to lead to, was security. Now, I see 2 different types of security. Some of the guys that are wearing black T-shirts, and then police officers. Is that
Yes.
correct? So really, the city is not paying for security. It's the purpose. It's the
Yes.
people who are putting on the show, right?
Yes, they pay.
So
for
if
all
there
that.
ever came a question of 1099s or anything like that, that is on them, not on us. Is that
should
correct?
be.
Okay.
The provider shall provide a phone or online customer ticketing order and information service to answer any ticketing questions. The provider shall be able to provide additional ticket outlets at the city or the promoter's request for large events that warrant additional ticketing outlets. The provider shall be able to provide refunds within 10 business days to the customers if the event is canceled. Also, the provider shall be able to handle all cash sales of public ticketed events. The city will not be involved with any cash dealings or purchasing of tickets. And also, this is the insurance requirements. Of course, we did go through risk management. Mr. Charles Hagan did give me all of this information that is right here. The provider must provide the current insurance requirements to be operational at our facilities. So the commercial general liability, as you can see, is the minimum limits. You can read all through those terms right there. And then it also goes on to business auto liability for auto, workman's compensation too as well. Do you all have any questions on ticketing, ticket vendors? Why this route? Any questions on the guidelines?
Oh, that makes sense. And we're able to find people who meet these guidelines without any problems, correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, good. Are we to the end?
Yes, the T's were the last thing. So what we're looking for today is of course, we're working on the facility policies. I'm looking for a board recommendation, and then to be able to bring this to City Council by December 12th or January 9th, if there isn't any questions. What I did do as well, if you look at your December calendar, if there was any type of questions, I did put down a safety time for us to, if we needed some time to discuss this before going to council. So I believe it's December 6th. Yes, I'll put down December 6th. So if we wanted to come back and look at them and discuss again, I put a safety time just to have December 6th so I can still be able to meet the deadline of, meeting December 12th or January 9th as well.
Unless I missed something, I'm not seeing a whole lot of variance from the things that the subcommittees talked about on these items. Does anybody see anything that we may have missed or want to include in the policies? It's pretty much everything we've talked about. So let's go ahead and make a board recommendation on the policies to go ahead and allow City to go ahead and forward those over to City Council. Do I hear a motion to approve the policies as presented by Mr. Walker today?
I'll make a motion.
So I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We got a 7-0 on that. Good luck with the council now.
Thank you.
Funny guy.
Moving on to the review of civic events, fiscal year 17. Of course, a lot of this I wanted to be able to give you all just an overall briefing on, what we've done this past year, what we've had, events, statistics, all those different, just different numbers and stuff, just things that I thought was actually very important or needed to be discussed with you all, just so you all can see where we're going and what our future is looking like too as well. So starting off, we're gonna just go with the total bookings for fiscal year 17. And I apologize, I know you all didn't get these numbers beforehand, but we definitely been working on these numbers right before the meeting and stuff to make sure that they were pretty much to being correct as possible. But the total bookings, if you look at it, our convention center, we have 219 bookings just for COSA, just for our staff meetings and stuff. We do about 213 here. At the Coliseum, we had 133 bookings this past year, 49 at the Paseo. Indoor Arena has 71. East Mezzanine was 81. COSA over there was 77. And then SAPAC had 4 of them over there. And then Farmers Market was 59. And Concrete Pavilion was 51. And then River Stage had 21 bookings.
Clarify the convention center, sorry.
Our convention center is 219 bookings, and then or 219 days used, and then 213 here, and for or just for all cities.
Yeah, there was a little over 420
Okay,
events here.
that answers that. I didn't know if 213 was
No.
of the 219.
No. Whew.
Right?
All right, so getting just down a little bit more. So public ticketed events, we had 86 of those. Days used is 134. So what we mean by days used is, you know, them coming in, the setup, the tear downs, all that stuff. So within those public ticketed events, we also had to use 134 days as well. Community events, we had 58 community events, and this is with all facilities combined. Community events, we had 58 days used to set up those events was 75. Private bookings, which would be your weddings, your quinceañeras, baby showers, birthday parties, all of those, we had 330. And then COSA meetings, we had 295. Tickets sold per facility. Of course, we had a great year with the concerts, the events, just all the shows, everything that led up to it. So this, for the Foster Communications Coliseum, we sold 56,246 tickets. Now that does include the rodeo that had, their numbers is around 36,000, somewhere around there. The River Stage we did this year, we did 10,336, and then at the Convention Center, we did 3,733. Now, over here at the Convention Center, we don't get many ticketed type events. I can think of maybe like 4 of them off the top of my head, but there are a few others, but they don't add up like the other numbers do as well. So this is, I think, this is the slide I believe that Billy was looking for. This is basically going back 4 years and just seeing where we were with each one of these. Now, before we start, of course, this goes off of what we actually budgeted. So if it was budgeted a little bit less, then of course the numbers could seem off a little bit more than what they should be. So if you go to the Coliseum, of course, this year we had a great year. We were over by $51,274. With the River Stage, we were over $2,172. The Convention Center, we fell short, $11,065. And now with the Convention Center, we did have times where, of course, we were offline whenever we did do the sewer project that was over here, which took about a month. 3 weeks, and then we also had one other incident that we didn't have any bookings, I believe, on a Saturday, which was very odd. I believe in one of the summer months that we had, we just didn't have a booking. But I feel that our numbers are actually improving, and we'll get there this year. Farmers Market Pavilion in the Paseo, of course, we did over, which was 4,936. And then if you go to concessions, this year we did over 19,000. We were budgeted at 40,000, but we did over that 19,703.
You know, and I always bring back to concessions and hot funds and everything. Concessions, is, of course, is a generated revenue that is not affiliated with hot funds at all. And I'm just considering whether or not they're going to pass that through to the general fund or if that gets to stay with you. You know what? It's a go back to the slide, to the previous slide, please, sir. All right. I'm a little bit surprised because I thought you had a great year at the River Stage. That fiscal 15 surpassed that. And I don't know what went on.
We had a great year, but you also have to notice that our revenue, we did over like 20,000, I think it was. Whenever you look at some of these numbers, like let's take fiscal year 15. Well, they didn't budget. They only budgeted for 13,000. So I budgeted for 20,000 and did over.
Okay, yeah, because you're doing over budget. Yeah, I got you. Never mind. You're absolutely right. And of course, since I've got Teresa here, one of the things that I've always, and I commend you, Sid, you've done a great job. The shows that you've brought in, I mean, I know I've gone to a lot of them. People are just talking about them. There's a lot of buzz about them. And we know that you have talents as a promoter. And I'm going to continue to go out and say why I do not want to replace all the promoters that come in from San Angelo, but I sure would like to see you take a shot at taking a show for San Angelo. I know I've heard from different people that we're not in the business of promoting, but with your skill set and some of the revenues that we get from concessions that are not hot funds, why we can't go ahead and set a fund so that you might be able to bring a band in and the city keeps all the revenue. I don't understand where we would cross the line on that.
Appreciate it. I mean, of course, being a promoter, there's a lot of different factors and stuff, and we have, I mean, our relationships with the promoters that we do have right now is very great. I mean, they love the staff, they love working with Lori, they love working with Steve. I mean, they come back. That's one of the things. Whenever you do have great business and great service, promoters will definitely come back if they didn't take a major fall. But you know, majority of our promoters will be working with us. We already have a lot of things that's lined up in the future that we would like to see happening. There's not many times. Would I like to be able to do an event with the city? Yes, but I consider that Riverfest, you know, and to be able to put something together or some type of event, you know, and I do want to do other events. I want to do community events where they're free concerts where we're just inviting people out to the river stage to come and enjoy a concert on a Wednesday evening after work and stuff like that. I do think I could be helpful in those skills. Not saying that I don't want to be able to do a show with the city, but it is a tough task. And you know, whenever you're messing with dollars and stuff like that, it's interesting.
Well,
you know?
well, for example, this year, Riverfest would have been a great opportunity for you to showcase your talents because, you know, things just didn't, and for no fault of your own, just didn't quite work out at the main concert, you know, where you may have been able to get a free reign and we could have gone on with a big concert.
All right, well, we kind of did that with the follow-up benefit concert. It was a
no.
few weeks later, but yeah, there's not an issue with him using his talents to promote events. It's just what's going to pay for that. That becomes the issue. If we can get sponsorships to pay for it, we can,
We get
can easily do
sponsorships.
it.
Well, you're right. And if we get sponsorships to do that, and because we don't want to convolute using hot funds for something like that, I understand that, you know. But again, the revenue that comes from concessions is not hot funds. So I would think that would be good seed money to allow them to do something
And we
like
could
that.
do that as long as it's budgeted and approved by council.
That's just my thoughts.
I don't think that we've had those conversations in my office and upstairs, and I don't think there's a lot of disagreement with that, but there's some things that just are not well suited for city environments because of our rules and funding and all those things, and I think that ultimately becomes one of them. Not that it can't happen, it's just not real feasible. So we have more money. But he takes requests from me for people, so I think he's great.
Right. All right.
So as well as you all know, we started a facility needs project too as well that we did with our facilities. And just to go and show some of the improvements that we had, of course, we had the doors that were done at the Coliseum as well. The lighting that we changed out to LED lighting in the VIP room, which has done wonders for events that we've had. It's just changed it up. If y'all don't remember those fans that we had, man, those fans were a work of art. But there it is. But the Coliseum ceiling tiles as well, changing out those two at the Coliseum. We went from these bad chairs. Yeah, I had to bring them back. These classic chairs to, you know, just imagine we would have had that Gary Allen show and they would have had to sit in those chairs. And then on the side, I really got to commend our civic event staff for going in and changing the dressing room and renovating it and changing it from a locker room to a nice dressing room where we can have people come through there. I'll take Casting Crowns. I mean, we did them 2 years ago, so they went in when we had the dressing room, and now for them to be able to walk in and we have nice little facility, nicer dressing rooms. I won't say they're the greatest, but they're nicer than where we started from. We're actually still working on that, trying to add more showers and bathrooms as well in there too, as well, private restrooms and stuff.
Oh, I saw it before and after, and y'all did a great job on that. Steve, commend you on that. Y'all really went in there and did a good
They did
job
great.
compared to what it looked like before.
Yeah, this is where you should have put a before and after picture.
Well, Carl was in the picture. He didn't want the before.
Yeah, I didn't want Carl in that. So now I want to go through what we did spend, the estimated costs, the actual costs, and the variance that we did have. So with the sewer line that was completed earlier last year, we estimated it was going to be $71,000. It came in at $68,941. So you can see what we saved in the variance. The re-roofing, of course, came under too as well. We estimated 222. It came in at 217. Climate control, 104, but it came out to 25,000. If you all remember that the rodeo stock show actually paid, they put in 25,000 too as well, saying correctly, as well on that project. Air handler number 3, it was, we estimated it was 23,370. It did come in at 13,680. They didn't have to do as much work as they thought they were gonna need to do on it. Chairs for the river stage, were $10,000. The ADA lift for the Coliseum did go over, but the reason why it did go over was whenever they did go in for the to look at the boards and stuff, one of the boards was malfunctioned, so we did have to replace it and get a new board for it, which put us a little bit over and stuff too as well. Resurfacing the Paseo and Farmers Market, we have not started that project because we had met earlier in the year with myself and Steve met with Mr. Shane Kelton to discuss the resurfacing, and the way that the Farmers Market is, we wouldn't be able to, with what we had estimated, it would actually need to be a little bit more than, well, not even a little, it needs to be around 25,000. To be able to resurface the Paseo and the Farmers Market. They can't use the same machine that they would normally use when they're doing a resurfacing under the Farmers Market Pavilion. They have to do that by hand, so that changes the quote a lot. Door replacement for the Paseo, we're actually trying to get started on that. They were the same ones that were replacing at the Coliseum. They should be working on the Paseo, but that project has not been started yet, but we should have it ready to go in the next month. Lighting replacement for the Paseo is only at $468 right now. What we are doing is waiting till all the ballast goes out for the lights and stuff, and then we will be changing them out as we go. VIP room for the lighting, as you've seen in the picture, we did go over because we did change it to where we can change the settings on the lights and stuff. They're LED lights too as well, so they can they're just not a flick of a switch. Ceiling tiles for the Coliseum was $5,000, and we did save a little bit on that at $3,815. And then the door replacements for the Coliseum did come a little bit over the $22,500 that we had, but it came in at $23,400. So with the estimated cost of all of that, the estimated cost was $483,920, but the actual cost that we did so far would be $372,585 with a variance of $1,100. I'm sorry, $111,000.
Does that include the projects we still have to do?
Yes, sir.
You back up again. Okay.
But the door replacements we do, I plan on hoping that we have this done before I do go to council. If not, it'll be right around that time. And then
So we still think we need about $40,000 to finish up those two projects?
which one, the resurfacing? Yeah, so with the resurfacing, and I'll get into it in a few.
Okay.
I plan on bringing that back to council, discussing that with them too as well as you all, and being able to get the funding corrected for that and stuff, and be able to work on that project.
Sid, on your lighting projects, are you guys replacing with LEDs on all of those?
In the VIP room, or you're just talking about like for the
Paseo.
Paseo? Yes, they are.
I mean, that's kind of the trend for a lot of facilities is going LED. The rate of return is huge, so that's why I was curious. Thank you.
So
I think we did very well. Thank you.
yes, I think we did very well savings, and I have to commend Steve on and definitely Don on that. You know, we're looking at all the bids, and just that takes some time. It's very tedious with the phone calls and everything else too as well. Future facility needs. This is only our what we see so far and stuff. Of course, we plan on going out there with you all to each one of the facilities and viewing them and discussing all these issues. But some of them you already know about, which are the fire protection needs at the Coliseum, the chiller at the Coliseum. We would love to have new staging at the Coliseum. 3 spotlights are needed at the Coliseum as well. Restriping the parking lot at the Coliseum, lower ring roofing at the Coliseum as well, and then this is just out there, the concession stand monitors at the Coliseum too as well.
Real quick, on the spotlights, seems like every year we're doing spotlights. Is there a plan to?
Yeah, so my plan would of course be to purchase new spotlights instead of going back and getting used spotlights. And then there was some problems with one of the spotlights that we did have. We've already situated that with SASRA, and they've taken care of it for us. But spotlights are always needed, and the ones that we have are heavy. It takes time to be able to put them in their areas and positions, and I mean I know how much we need those. Whenever it comes down to rodeo time, we use all of the spotlights. Concerts, we can get away most of the time. They only need maybe 2 tops, maybe 3, but whenever it does come down to rodeo time, we do need all of them filled. Other items were parking lot striping for the Coliseum as well. And then you have striping over here at the convention center. Scheduling software. The scheduling software is what Ms. Lori actually uses to schedule and book events, private, public events and stuff. The scheduling software that we have been using is 1998, I believe. And it's not supported. We don't, if it goes down today, we lose everything. So for me, it's very important that we look into something about scheduling software. Now, we have been doing research on these things, and many of the times when we sit in on these phone meetings, all they're trying to sell us is they're not selling us what we're looking for in scheduling and stuff. It's all in design and other things that we don't need. That what we're really needing is scheduling and bookings and all of those things as well. And it just worries me that one day if that computer goes out and she loses everything, then that's all of our information in there. So with that, we have 5 computer replacements, which there's 4 over here and then one at the Coliseum. Also with our computers are the same thing. With the computers we're about 10 years. So it's another item that we're looking at trying to get replaced too as well. One of the major things at the convention center too is the interior walls. Since we did do the re-roofing of the the convention center, we now need to be able to work on the interior of the walls. As you can see in certain areas that the walls just look, they're in bad condition, terrible condition. So I think we're ready to be able to start working on that process and getting quotes and bids on that too. The river stage definitely needs electrical needs. Gary Allen was a great concert, but the electrical needs for an event to be able to happen like that we have to do a better job, and we have to get the right type of power settings for everything to be placed. I mean, it could be a nightmare.
Something has to be done with that, especially the shows that you're bringing in and having the
needs of them. The bigger the artist, the bigger the needs are for them.
That's the only way you're going to attract them. You're absolutely right.
Screen went out. I don't know why. I had to
Okay.
wake it back up.
Resurfacing parking lots. Of course, that's what we were speaking about the farmers market and the paseo that I would like to bring back to the board, back to you all and to council. So my timeline for all of these would be we would do facility tours January 18th or January 25th. We could start a little bit early, but I know the holidays are coming up, and I don't know what everybody's schedule is. Including our own staff too as well. So I went ahead and just said we would do January 18th and 25th. It would be good possibly to go out around the 25th because they will be setting up for the rodeo. So it would be great to go out and do a tour around that time of the facility. And then I would like to be able to bring this back to you all, to the board, and by at least February 22nd, maybe if we need to have a second reading or a second opinion on the stuff by March 23rd. And then I would like to be able to go to City Council at least by April 3rd, if not earlier than that date that's stated right there.
Sid, can you go back to the one more? I'm looking at computer replacements.
Yes, sir.
To me, that's an M&O cost, not necessarily a capital or venue need. Is there not an opportunity to utilize over-realized revenue to put on a 2-year plan to replace, 2 computers a year? I mean, kind of a refreshing plan.
We can do that. I know that we did try to get the computers. We tried to get the software? Yeah, We tried to get it in the carryover for the software and the computers, and we did not get to receive that carryover. So that's why I'm bringing it to.
Did we have an encumbrance last year for those computers?
No, sir.
So do y'all fit in under the city's ADP people?
The IT?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So they supply you with computers?
No.
Each department's responsible. They recommend what we get, and approve what we get, but we have to pay for it.
And they have said that we need, both on the scheduling software and on the computer replacements, that we need to do that. We need to look into it. They said there's nothing that they can do for us. I mean, right now, Don can't even open up a picture if it was sent to him.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking.
Questions?
Well, since we're reviewing Civic for 17, some of the things that I absorbed throughout the years that I just want to make comments on. Of course, I have always commended you on the shows that you've brought into the Coliseum, Convention Center, River Stage, all the things that you've done throughout the year. I mean, you can just tell by your numbers how good a job that you have done. Some of the small things that I've absorbed from going through some of these events, he brought up a while ago about concessions, about being opt out. But on another thing, just make sure that you have, that you guys formulate a plan, talk about where we place concessions during these events. That was just one of the things that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way at 2 or 3 shows where we just basically block lines. You know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
I don't have to go. But those things, I don't know if you have any authority over placement of security, but I know that sometimes I've gone to some shows and maybe security would have been, instead of congregated, maybe spread out a little bit more. Those kind of things that just we can maybe do a little bit better job going forward. But other than that, man, I had no problems with all the stuff that you did this year. You did a great job.
I'd like to make a comment as well. We have a city, you've done a great job. I'll echo what Billy said, but coming from a position of management, you're only as good as your support staff underneath you. So, I mean, you do a great job, but I also have to commend Steve and
That's
Lori
right.
and
Of course.
and Don, and I see Tibby run around in the shadows at certain events. And, I mean, everybody that you have on your staff does an amazing job, very professional. So I just want that noted that, we appreciate everything that they do.
Yeah, they do a lot. I mean, whenever we do throw in these concerts, there's times when the dates are very odd placed, and we already have an event that's already scheduled to be in there the next day. So, I mean, there's overnight shifts and things like that. And, I mean, we have to depend on our full-time, part-time employees to be able to come in here, change those over, and be ready for the next day for a rental. I mean, that's cleaning, moving a stage, and you'll see when you look at the Coliseum stage why we desperately need one, because it's critical in the time. The time that it takes to put up that stage is a very long. It's a tedious process, and it's a dangerous process too as well. I mean, it's the original stage, I believe. So, I mean, it's working back then.
Well, I hope you get that stage.
Me too.
We done with that? All right. How about consideration of future agenda items?
I feel like I'm the only one talking here. I may be, but I'd like to request that we discuss the concession contract. I've overheard some rumblings of our certain contracted concessionaire opting out, so I'd like to discuss that.
Okay, we will put. Let me go back. Okay, I'll put it on the next one.
Sid, how hard would it be to present to us what you present when you're going after concerts or anything else?
It's hard to do something like that, because at the end of the day, it's not about how it's a relationship. It's how you treat your customers, how you go at it and stuff. It's not numbers.
You don't have a bid packet or anything, just a
No,
stock
ma'am.
one? Okay.
I take phone calls at 8 p.m. at night talking about how somebody's concert's going to do. That's what gets you the concert. It doesn't. There's no other way around it. I work with them hand in hand. When they come in and want to work on it, they give myself, they'll give Steve a call, they'll give Lori a call. I mean, there's just so many pieces that are involved in it to make sure that they're good. It's no actual packet that I give out. It's more of like with one of them that I have coming up, it was more of like, this is what we're looking for. This is where we're at. Let me know what artists you do have. And we try to work on both sides. It's not just about the city. I always look at it from their side too as well, because these artists are not cheap. They are not cheap. They are very expensive whenever it comes to it. So our little piece, they can easily run to Abilene, Lubbock, anywhere else. We're already off the beaten path. So it's really just hey, we really want you to be here and bring these events to us.
Yeah, I mean, I know they jumped through hoops trying to get everything together. I mean, maybe a question you might ask is maybe the closing statements versus that, and seeing how it performed.
I just don't know that much about bringing concerts. I just wanted to be a little more educated on it, so.
A lot to it, isn't there?
There's a lot of different steps to it, and there is negotiations going back and forth, and there's looking at previous contracts that we've had and previous events that we've had with them, and just really making sure that the numbers that we're capping it at and they're all agreeable on both sides. That's the one thing. I don't like to see a promoter walk away and say, "Oh, I just can't deal with those numbers." Some of them they'll play the game with you and stuff, but when they're just playing the game. But for the most part, we definitely try to work with them and make sure that we can bring in those events. I mean, just in the future, we've already got a few festivals that are already lined up for the River Stage. We got a new wrestling entertainment that'll be coming to the city besides the WWE that has already put in 4 dates that I have a conversation with tomorrow. I mean, we're already working on November and, for next year. So, I mean, it's conversation. It's going back and forth. It's replying to those emails. It's replying to those texts and letting them know that you appreciate them trying to bring that event to San Angelo.
Well, good. Like I said, over the last year, I mean, I'm glad that you're just not somebody who just sits in an office. You get out there and get things done. All right. Well, I think we're done. So if I could get a motion to adjourn, please.
Adjourn.
A second? All in favor, say aye. We are adjourned.